The apartment in Siloam is small enough that Stephanie can touch both walls of the kitchen at the same time if she stretches her arms out, which she does sometimes, late at night, just to feel the shape of the space they've built together. It is 11 p.m. on a Tuesday and she is doing the math again. Rent. Utilities. The loan payment on Jin Hyun's father's medical bills, which they took on 2 years ago and have been chipping away at the way you chip away at a mountain with a spoon. Visible progress if you measure carefully enough. Invisible progress if you don't. Groceries. The transit pass. The small, humiliating math of two people who love each other completely and cannot quite make the numbers love them back. Jin Hyun comes home at 11:40. She hears his key before she hears him, the specific fumble of a man who has been on his feet since 6 a.m. and whose hands are tired in a way that has nothing to do with strength. "You're late," she says. Not an accusation, just an observation, soft, the kind you make to someone you've been waiting for. "Overtime," he says. He drops his bag by the door, comes to the kitchen table where she's sitting with her laptop and the numbers that don't love them back. "They asked. I said yes. We need it, Jin Hyun." "I know." He sits across from her, takes her hand. His palm is rough in a new place. She notices these things, the small geography of his hands changing with whatever job has occupied them most recently. "I know we need more than overtime. I'm trying. I know you are." They sit like that for a moment, her hand in his, the laptop glowing between them with numbers that need to be bigger than they are. They married 4 years ago, right out of university, against the gentle but persistent advice of both sets of parents who thought 23 was too young and no savings was too risky. "And you've only known each other since sophomore year" was a sentence that should have carried more weight than it did. They didn't listen. They had been right not to listen, mostly. The marriage itself has never been the problem. The marriage is the one thing in their life that has worked exactly as promised, warm, steady, two people who choose each other every single day without needing to be reminded to. The money is the problem. The money has always been the problem. Kim calls on a Thursday. Stephanie almost doesn't pick up. She's mid-shift at the convenience store she works evenings at, the one that pays badly but flexibly, the kind of job you take when your degree in marketing hasn't yet translated into the marketing job it was supposed to translate into. She sees his name. Steps outside. "Kim." "It's been months. Too long," he says. His voice has the easy warmth she remembers from university, Jin Hyun's roommate freshman year, the friend who was there for everything important, the best man at their wedding who gave a speech that made her mother cry. "How are you?" "How's Jin Hyun?" "We're okay," she says, which is the version of the truth you give people you haven't talked to in months. "Just okay." She hesitates. "We're managing." A pause on his end, the particular pause of someone deciding whether to ask the next question. "Stephanie, I have something to run by you." What he runs by her is this. His company, a luxury logistics firm with offices across Asia, the company he built from nothing in the 8 years since graduation, the company that has made him genuinely, publicly successful, is opening a new regional office in Singapore. He needs someone for client relations and marketing coordination. Someone bilingual, presentable, sharp. "I thought of you immediately," he says. "You were always the best writer in our group. You understand brand the way most people understand breathing." "Kim, I don't have logistics experience. You don't need it. I need someone who can manage relationships and represent the brand. That's marketing. That's you." "What's the salary?" he tells her. She sits down on the curb outside the convenience store because the number he says is more than double what she and Jin Hyun make combined. "Kim, I know it's a lot to consider," he says. "Relocation. Distance from Jin Hyun. I understand if it's complicated. It would solve everything," she says before she can stop herself. "Then let it," he says simply. "Let me do this for you, for both of you. You've been there for me since university, through things I don't talk about with most people. This is nothing. This is just me finally being able to return a fraction of it," she tells Jin Hyun that night. He is quiet for a long time after she finishes, the particular quiet of a man doing math he doesn't want to do, weighing things he doesn't want to weigh. "Singapore," he says finally. "Singapore, that's..." He stops. "That's far. It's a 5-hour flight." "It's far," he says again, and she understands he doesn't mean the distance in kilometers. "Jin Hyun, the salary alone would pay off your father's medical debt in 14 months. 14 months instead of the 7 years we're currently looking at. He rubs his face with both hands. I know, and it's Kim, she says. It's not a stranger. You trust him with everything. He stood up at our wedding. I know, he says again. That's not what I'm worried about. Then what are you worried about? He looks at her, really looks, the way he used to look at her in university before exhaustion became the default texture of his face. I'm worried about missing you, he says simply. I'm worried about what happens to us if we spend 2 years on different sides of the world. She crosses the small kitchen, sits in his lap the way she used to when they were 23 and broke and certain about everything. We've survived harder things than distance, she says. Have we? We survived your father's diagnosis. We survived 3 years of ramen and bus fare. We survived my mother telling us at the wedding that we'd regret this. She kisses his forehead. We can survive a few video calls. He laughs small, real, the first real laugh she's heard from him in weeks. A few video calls, he repeats. 2 years, she says. Maybe less if the debt clears faster than we think. Then I come home. Then we're not doing this math anymore. He holds her for a long time. Okay, he says finally. Okay, let's do it. The weeks before she leaves are the happiest they've been in over a year. There's something about a deadline, a known, finite period of separation with a clear purpose. That makes the present feel more valuable. They go to their favorite cheap restaurant 3 times. They walk through Hanggang Park on a Sunday they should have spent doing chores and don't regret it. They make love slowly, deliberately, the way you do when you know exactly how many more times you'll get to before everything changes shape. 2 years, Jin Hyun says, the night before her flight, both of them lying in the dark of their small apartment with her suitcase packed and waiting by the door. Maybe less, he agrees. And then we buy a real apartment, one with a real kitchen. One where I can't touch both walls at once. He laughs against her shoulder. Exactly that. And your father's debt is gone, he says. And we never have to do this math again. She turns to face him in the dark. I love you more, he says, which is the thing he has said every night since they were 22 years old, the small ritual that has outlasted every hard year they've survived together. Not possible, she says, which is what she always says back. He kisses her. The suitcase waits by the door. Kim meets her at Changi Airport himself. She wasn't expecting that. She expected a driver, a company car, the professional distance appropriate for an employer. Instead, she comes through arrivals and there he is, in a linen shirt that looks expensive in the specific way of things that are expensive without trying to look it. Holding a small bouquet of flowers like this is a reunion rather than an onboarding. Stephanie Park. He grins. Look at you. International woman now, Kim. She hugs him, the easy, familiar hug of someone who has known him for 8 years, who trusts him completely, who watched him cry at her wedding when he gave his toast about loyalty and chosen family. The flowers are ridiculous, she says. I love them. I wanted your first impression of Singapore to be good, he says. Come on. I'll show you the apartment. The company's covering it. It's nicer than you're expecting. The apartment is, in fact, nicer than she's expecting. A 1-bedroom in a high-rise in the central business district, floor-to-ceiling windows. A view of the bay that makes her stop in the doorway and just look for a full minute. This is the company's standard relocation package, she asks. For senior hires, Kim says. Don't worry about it. She doesn't worry about it. She should eventually ask why client relations and marketing coordination counts as a senior hire. She doesn't think to ask yet. The first week is everything she hoped it would be. The office is glass and steel and genuinely impressive, 40 employees. A view of the harbor, the specific hum of a company that is succeeding. Her colleagues are warm. Her work is interesting, actual marketing work, brand strategy, client communications that use the skills she spent 4 years in university developing, and 4 years since then not using. She calls Jin Hyun every night. The first calls are long, an hour, 90 minutes, both of them talking over each other to share everything about their respective days. He tells her about a coworker's joke. She tells him about the view from her new office. They are, for the first 2 weeks, exactly as connected as they were when they shared a kitchen with 2 touchable walls. I miss you, she says every call. So much. I miss you more, he says, which is true and also slightly different from I love you more in a way neither of them examines yet. She falls asleep some nights with the call still connected, both of them too tired to keep talking. neither of them wanting to be the one to hang up first. It feels, for those first 2 weeks, exactly like what Kim called it, a blessing. Kim takes her to lunch on her 10th day, a working lunch ostensibly to discuss the Q3 client strategy, at a restaurant with white tablecloths and a view that costs more than her old monthly rent in Seoul. "How's the adjustment?" he asks. "Good," she says honestly. "Better than good. I forgot what it felt like to actually use my degree. You're good at this," he says. "I've watched the client materials you put together this week. You have an instinct for it. Thank you, I mean it," he says. I don't say things I don't mean. There's a quality to the way he says it, slightly too direct, slightly too held, that she notices and immediately dismisses. He has always been intense. University Kim was the same way, the friend who looked you directly in the eye when he said things, who didn't do small talk easily, who Jin Hyun used to describe affectionately as too honest for his own good. She files it as nothing. How's Jin Hyun handling the distance? Kim asks, switching topics smoothly. He's okay, she says. We talk every night. Good, Kim says. That's good. He smiles at her, warm, familiar. The smile of a man who gave a wedding toast about loyalty and chosen family and meant every word of it. I'm glad you're here, Stephanie, he says. I've wanted this for a long time. She smiles back, because it's a kind thing to say, because he is her husband's best friend and her own friend of 8 years, because the apartment has floor-to-ceiling windows and the job uses her degree, and the debt will be gone in 14 months instead of 7 years. Me too, she says. She has no reason yet to hear it any other way. If you're enjoying this story, please leave a like and comment where you're watching us from. Also, don't forget to subscribe to get more stories like this. By the 4th week, the calls start changing shape. Not dramatically, nothing either of them would point to and call a problem, just smaller. 90 minutes becomes 60, becomes 45. The overtalking, the eagerness to share every detail of the day settles into something more efficient, practical updates. How was work? I'm tired. I love you. Good night. Stephanie tells herself this is normal. Novelty fades. Routines form. This is what every long-distance arrangement looks like once the adrenaline of the change wears off. She still believes that mostly at the start of the 4th week. You sound tired, she says to Jin Hyun on a Wednesday call. 11 p.m. her time, midnight his. I am tired, he says. Double shift today. They're short-staffed. You should say no sometimes. We need the money, Steph. We don't need it as badly now, she says. My salary alone is covering more than we projected. A pause. I know. I still want to contribute properly. You are contributing. Not as much as you, he says. And there's something in his voice, not bitter exactly, but tired in a specific way that has nothing to do with the double shift. She doesn't push it. She's learned across 4 years of marriage when to let a thing breathe instead of poking at it. I love you, she says. I love you more, he says. It still feels true. It just takes a half-second longer to say than it used to. The loneliness arrives gradually and then all at once, the way most real things do. Singapore is beautiful and her colleagues are kind and the work is genuinely engaging. But at the end of each day, she goes back to an apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and nobody to share the view with. She has not made real friends yet, acquaintances, work friends, the polite surface-level relationships of someone 4 weeks into a new city. She eats dinner some nights standing at the kitchen counter because sitting down at a table built for two, alone, feels like a specific kind of sad she'd rather avoid nomming. She starts working later. Not because she has to, because the office is full of people and the apartment is full of silence, and between the two, the office wins. Kim notices. You're here past 8 again, he says, leaning against her office doorway on a Thursday. He has a habit of doing this, appearing in doorways rather than knocking. A casualness she's never questioned because he's always been casual, because that's simply who Kim is, finishing the Henderson deck. It's not due until Monday. I like being ahead. He studies her for a moment. Or you don't want to go home to an empty apartment. She looks up from her laptop. The observation lands somewhere too accurate to deflect easily. Maybe both, she admits. Come have dinner with me, he says. Not a work thing. Just dinner. You've been here a month and you haven't actually seen the city, she hesitates. As friends, he adds, reading the hesitation correctly or seeming to. I introduced you to Jin Hyun, remember? I was at your wedding. I'm not exactly a stranger you need to be careful around. This is true. This has always been true. She has known Kim for 8 years. He has never given her a reason to be careful. Okay, she says. Dinner is genuinely fine. They go to a hawker center he loves, unpretentious, loud, completely different from the white tablecloth lunch from her first week. He tells stories about university she half remembers and laughs at, real laughter, the kind that makes the apartment's silence feel further away for a few hours. He asks about Jin Hyun. Asks good questions, the kind that show he's actually listening. How is he handling the overtime? Is the medical debt still on the same timeline? Does he seem okay? He sounds tired when we talk, Stephanie admits. More tired than he says he is. That's Jin Hyun, Kim says. He's never been good at admitting when he's struggling, even in university. You remember sophomore year when his scholarship almost got pulled and he didn't tell anyone for 3 weeks? I remember. Some people carry things quietly, Kim says. He's one of them. You're one of the few people who can actually get him to put it down. It's a kind observation. A true one. She finds herself grateful for it. For someone who knows Jin Hyun well enough to understand him in this specific way, who can offer her a piece of insight into her own husband that makes the distance feel slightly less isolating. Thank you, she says, for tonight. I needed this. Anytime, Kim says. I mean that. He pays before she can reach for her card. She lets him old habit, old friendship, nothing that registers as significant. The first comment that doesn't quite sit right comes 2 weeks later. It's small. It's almost nothing. She replays it later and still can't decide if she's overreacting, which is its own kind of unsettling, the specific disorientation of not trusting your own read on something. They're in the office kitchen, both reaching for the coffee machine at the same time. He lets her go first. You're glowing today, he says. I slept well for once, she says, mostly joking. No, he says, and his eyes do something linger, just slightly longer than the comment requires. It's more than that. He stops himself, shakes his head. Never mind, what nothing. Forget I said anything. She doesn't forget it exactly, but she files it the way she's been filing things, as nothing, as Kim being Kim, as a man who has always been a little too direct for his own good. University, Kim never had much of a filter. This is consistent with that. This is not new information. You're being weird, she says lightly. Occupational hazard, he says, recovering his easy smile. Pour your coffee. Henderson's calling at 10, she lets it go. The video calls with Jin Hyun continue to compress. By week 6, they've settled into a rhythm of 30 minutes, sometimes less. He's exhausted in a way that's visible now even through a screen, the specific gray quality under his eyes, the way his sentences trail off mid-thought. Are you eating? She asks one night when I have time. Jin Hyun, I'm fine, Steph. Tell me about your day. She tells him about her day. The Henderson deck went well. Kim took her to a hawker center she liked. The Singapore office is expanding faster than projected, which means more responsibility, which means Kim's been taking you out a lot, Jin Hyun says, interrupting, his voice carefully neutral. She pauses. We're friends, Jin Hyun. He's your best friend. I know, are you? She studies his face on the small screen. Are you bothered by it? No, he says too quickly. Then more honestly, I don't know. It's strange hearing about your life there and not being in it. He's there. I'm not, he's just being kind. I'm alone in a new city. I know, Jin Hyun says again. I'm grateful he's looking out for you. I am. But something in his voice doesn't fully match the words, and she notices it the way she's been noticing things lately. Small fractures in surfaces that used to be smooth. Things she can't quite name but can feel. I love you. She says, I love you more, he says. The call ends 9 minutes earlier than usual. Kim's behavior shifts incrementally over the following weeks. Nothing she could point to as a single moment. Just a steady accumulation of small things that, individually, mean nothing, and collectively, are starting to mean something she doesn't want to name yet. He stands slightly closer than he used to in conversations. He texts outside of work hours now, not constantly, but enough that she started noticing the timestamps. Saw this and thought of you. A photo of a sunset. You'd like this restaurant. We should go. He compliments her in ways that have started to feel less like friendship and more like something else. You're the smartest person in this office, you know that, delivered with a directness that lingers a half-second too long. She mentions it to no one. Not Jin Hyun, who has enough to carry. Not her new colleagues, whom she barely knows. She holds it herself, turning it over, trying to decide if she's imagining a shift that isn't there or ignoring one that is. She wants it to be nothing. She has 8 years of friendship telling her it's nothing. She has a small, persistent feeling in her chest telling her something different. The end hook arrives on a Friday evening. She's working late again. The Henderson account has expanded into something requiring more hours than the original scope, which she's noticed happens conveniently often with Kim's accounts. And the office has emptied out except for the cleaning staff and Kim, who appears in her doorway the way he always does, without knocking. Last one standing again, he says. Almost done. He comes in. Sits on the edge of her desk, not the chair across from it, the desk itself, close enough that she has to angle slightly to keep working Stephanie. Has it been good, he says, coming here, working with me? Has it been what you hoped it has, she says honestly, still looking at her screen. I'm grateful, Kim, truly good, he says, because I want you to know whatever you need, however this needs to look, I'm here for it. I take care of the people he pauses, the kind of pause that feels deliberate. The people who matter to me, she looks up. He's watching her with an expression that has stopped pretending to be entirely about friendship. Kim, she says carefully. I should let you finish up, he says, standing, the moment dissolving as quickly as it formed. Don't stay too late. He leaves. She sits at her desk for a long moment after the door closes, the Henderson deck glowing on her screen, unfinished, and a feeling settling into her chest that she can no longer file away as nothing. She picks up her phone. Almost calls Jin Hyun. She sets it back down. It's probably nothing, she tells herself. I'm probably overreacting. She doesn't fully believe it. She doesn't sleep well that night. Not because anything happened, nothing happened, she reminds herself, replaying it for the fourth time as she lies in her too-large bed in her too-quiet apartment. He sat on the edge of her desk. He said something about taking care of people who matter to him. That's it. That's the entire event. It is also, she knows, not the entire event. The entire event includes 8 weeks of incrementally shifting behavior, of standing slightly too close, of compliments that linger, of a man who has never before made her feel the need to angle her body away from him at her own desk. She does the thing she's been doing for weeks now, which is build a case against her own instincts. He's always been intense. He's always said things directly. He gave us our wedding toast. He's Jin Hyun's best friend. He flew across an ocean to pick me up at the airport himself with flowers because he wanted my first impression of Singapore to be good. People who are planning something don't behave like that for 8 years before doing anything. She falls asleep somewhere in the middle of this argument with herself. She doesn't fully win it. Monday, Kim acts like nothing happened. This, more than anything else, is what convinces her she imagined it. He's professional, warm in the ordinary way, asks about her weekend with genuine interest, runs the Monday meeting with his usual easy competence. No lingering looks. No edge of something else underneath his words. By Wednesday, she has mostly convinced herself the Friday evening was nothing, tiredness, a long week, a man being affectionate about a friendship that's lasted 8 years. She feels almost embarrassed about how much she turned it over in her mind. Almost. There is still a small, persistent residue she can't quite shake, the way his expression looked when she finally glanced up at him. Not friendly. Not platonic. Something else entirely, briefly visible before he recovered his usual face. She tells herself she misread it. She is good, by now, at telling herself things. The compliment that breaks the pattern comes on a Thursday, in front of 2 other colleagues, which is somehow what makes it worse rather than better, public enough that she can't address it directly without making a scene. Private enough in its implication that the other 2 people in the room either don't catch it or pretend not to. They're reviewing the Henderson presentation. Stephanie has reworked the brand narrative section, and it's good, genuinely good, the kind of work that made her love marketing in the first place. This is excellent, Kim says, scrolling through the slides. Stephanie has a gift. I've worked with a lot of people in this industry, and I've never seen someone who, he looks up at her, holds her gaze a half-second too long, who understands me this well, who gets exactly what I need before I say it. One of the colleagues, a junior associate named Wei Ling, laughs lightly. That's high praise from him. It's earned, Kim says, still looking at Stephanie. Stephanie smiles the professional smile she's gotten good at deploying. Glad it's working for the account. It's working for more than the account, Kim says. The room goes very slightly quiet, not dramatically, just a half-beat of something registering, even for Wei Ling, who glances between them with the specific expression of someone deciding whether she imagined the weight of that sentence. Anyway, Kim says, switching gears smoothly, professional again. Let's talk about the Q4 timeline. The meeting continues. Stephanie does not hear most of it. She tells herself again that she's overreacting. But the phrase sits in her chest differently than the desk edge moment did. Who understands me this well? Who gets exactly what I need before I say it? These are not the words of a man complimenting an employee's work product. These are the words of a man describing something else and wrapping it in professional language thin enough that everyone in the room can choose, comfortably, to misread it. She starts paying attention differently after that. Not paranoid, she's careful to draw that distinction for herself, careful not to let her judgment curdle into something unfair to a man who has been nothing but generous to her and Jin Hyun for 8 years, but attentive, watching for patterns instead of dismissing them individually. She notices. He finds reasons to be in her office that other senior staff don't replicate with other employees. She notices. His texts outside work hours have increased, and they've started carrying a quality of intimacy that doesn't match an employer-employee relationship, even an old friendship one, she notices. When she mentions Jin Hyun in conversation, something in Kim's face does something small and quick, not jealousy exactly, but adjacent to it, gone before she can fully name it. She starts saving the texts, not because she has a plan yet. Just because some instinct, deep and self-protective, tells her that documentation might matter eventually. She calls Jin Hyun that Thursday night and almost tells him. The words are right there. Kim said something strange today in front of other people, and I think he might be. She doesn't say them. Jin Hyun looks exhausted on the screen, more exhausted than usual, and when she asks how he's doing, he tells her about a setback with his father's recovery. A complication, nothing catastrophic, but enough to add stress to a man already running on fumes. I'm sorry, she says, meaning it completely. Do you need me to come home? I can ask for time off. No, he says immediately. No, don't do that. We need this job, Steph. We need the income. I'll manage. I always manage. You don't have to always manage alone. I'm not alone, he says. I have you, even from here. The sentence is sweet and also in this exact moment slightly devastating because she is sitting in Singapore holding a secret she hasn't decided whether to share, and the man on the screen believes completely that she is simply, uncomplicatedly with him. She decides not to add to his burden tonight. She decides she'll handle Kim herself. Quietly. Without making it Jin Hyun's problem on top of everything else he's carrying. She doesn't yet understand how much that decision will cost her. The following week arrives with the specific cruelty of ordinary things. Monday morning. Office. Coffee. The Henderson account's follow-up materials need a second pass. Wei Ling stops by her office to share lunch plans. Kim runs the 10 a.m. meeting with his usual precision. Everything looks exactly like what it has always looked like. A functional workplace. A successful company. A woman doing her job well in a city that has started slowly to feel like somewhere she lives rather than somewhere she landed. She has been watching. She has been documenting. She has been doing the internal work of a woman trying to stay fair to someone who has done 8 years of good things for her family, while also trusting the specific weight in her chest that has been accumulating for weeks. She has not told Jin Hyun. She has not decided what she is going to do. She is still at the start of this particular week, operating in the space between I am watching and I am ready to act, which is the most vulnerable space to be in, because it means she is present enough to see what's coming and not yet positioned to stop it. The incident happens on a Wednesday, not late at night, not in an empty office. At 2:15 in the afternoon, in the middle of a working day, in the corridor between the conference room and the main office floor, which tells her something important about how entitled he has become, that he no longer waits for the cover of empty spaces. They've just come out of a client meeting. A good one. She landed a communication strategy that the client responded to better than projected, and the room had that specific energy of something going right, which makes people warm and unguarded. Kim falls into step beside her. You were brilliant in there, he says. The way you pivoted when they raised the regional concern, that was instinct. You can't teach that, thank you, she says. I want to take you out to celebrate. Properly. Not the Hawker Center, somewhere you actually dress up for Kim. Just dinner, he says. You've earned it. She is deciding how to navigate this, the familiar territory of his invitations, the familiar work of threading between gratitude and boundary, when they reach the corridor junction and he touches her, not dramatically, not aggressively. A hand at the small of her back, the way people guide each other through doorways, the kind of contact that in another context between two other people would register as nothing at all. But it isn't nothing. It is deliberate in a way she feels immediately, the weight of it, the placement of it, the specific quality of a touch that knows exactly what it is doing and is waiting to see what happens next. She steps forward, out of reach, turns to face him. Kim, her voice is even. She is proud of how even it is. Don't do that, he looks at her. His expression doesn't show embarrassment, that's what she registers first, and it matters. Embarrassment would mean he'd miscalculated the moment. What she sees instead is a brief recalibration, the look of a man adjusting his approach, not reassessing his intention. My apologies, he says. Smooth. Immediate. That was don't, she says. Don't explain it. Just don't do it again. He holds her gaze for a moment. Then he nods once, measured, the nod of a man who has noted a boundary and is deciding how long to observe it. Of course, he says. He continues down the corridor. She stands at the junction for a moment, her hand against the wall, doing the specific internal arithmetic of a woman who has just had something confirmed that she desperately wanted to remain unconfirmed. This is not a misunderstanding, she thinks. She has been calling it a misunderstanding for 2 months. She cannot call it that anymore. She goes back to her office and closes the door. She sits at her desk and looks at the Henderson follow-up materials on her screen and does not see them. She runs it again, not to second-guess herself. She is done second-guessing herself, but because she needs to be precise about what she knows. Precise, because what she does next needs to be built on accuracy rather than feeling, what she knows. Kim touched her deliberately, in a way that communicated possession rather than collegiality. What she knows. When she named it, he did not apologize, he managed it, my apologies, which is the language of someone controlling the narrative rather than someone genuinely sorry. What she knows. His expression when she stepped away was recalibration, not remorse. What this means. He is not confused about whether his interest is welcome. He has received her discomfort clearly, repeatedly, across weeks of incrementally escalating behavior, and he has continued. This is not a man misreading signals. This is a man who has decided her signals are an obstacle rather than a message. The rest of the day she manages with the specific, contained focus of someone who has a crisis to hold and a job to do simultaneously. She finishes the Henderson materials. She attends a 3 p.m. call. She smiles at the right moments. She does not let anything show. Kim does not come by her office again for the remainder of the day. This, she notes, is also information. He is giving her space, not because he's rethinking anything, but because he understands this requires a different pace. He has always been strategic. She knew this about him from university. She simply never thought she would need to account for it in this context. At 5:30 she gathers her things. At the elevator she passes Wei Ling, who is leaving at the same time. Good meeting today, Wei Ling says. Thanks. Mr. Kim seemed pleased. A pause. He's always pleased with your work. Stephanie looks at her. Wei Ling is 26, sharp, relatively new to the company. Her expression is carefully neutral, the expression of someone who has noticed things and is offering a door without quite opening it. Wei Ling, Stephanie says. Have you ever, she stops. Have I ever what the elevator arrives? They step in nothing, Stephanie says. Never mind, she files Wei Ling's expression carefully. Not yet, but filed. She calls Jin Hyun that night at 11 p.m. her time. She has been on the phone for 3 minutes, hearing him talk about his day, a small good thing that happened at work, a colleague who made him laugh. And she is simultaneously present in the conversation and elsewhere, sitting with the thing she hasn't said, running the math of whether tonight is the night she says it. She wants to tell him. She has always told Jin Hyun everything. The 10 years of accumulated evidence of their life together is built partly on this, on the specific trust of a marriage where neither of them carries things alone. But she runs the other math too. If she tells him tonight, exhausted as he is, carrying his father's health and the overtime and the specific, quiet pride wound of being the husband whose wife's salary has outpaced his. If she tells him all of this tonight, across 5,000 kilometers of distance and a pixelated screen, she cannot predict what he does. She can predict actually. She knows Jin Hyun. He comes to Singapore on the next available flight because that is who he is. And then what? He confronts Kim, who has done nothing that is technically, legally unambiguous, a touch, a compliment, a look that lingered. A denial from Kim would be smooth and immediate, and Jin Hyun would be standing in Singapore with no job and a best friend who has just discovered that his actions have consequences, except that the consequences would fall on Jin Hyun and Stephanie, not on Kim, not yet. She needs more than this before she hands it to her husband. She needs Kim to make it undeniable. Are you okay? Jin Hyun says. You've gone quiet. I'm tired, she says. Long day, you work too hard. Learned from you, she says. He laughs. Real warm, the laugh she fell in love with at 20. Go to sleep, he says. I love you more, she says. She hangs up and sits in the quiet apartment for a long time. She picks up her phone and opens the notes application and types, not a diary entry, not feelings, dates, times, exact words. The precise sequence of what has happened and when. She is building something. She doesn't yet have a name for it, but she starts. 2 days later, Friday, Kim asks her to stay after the team debrief. She stays, the office empties around them. The familiar process of a Friday evening, lights dimming in distant offices, the cleaning staff beginning their rounds. She sits across from his desk this time, not beside it, the deliberate geometry of distance. I owe you a real apology, he says. She looks at him. Okay, Wednesday, the corridor. It was unprofessional and I shouldn't have. You said that in the corridor. I'm saying it again. Properly. She watches him. The apology is well-constructed, genuine-sounding, appropriately humble, the right vocabulary. She notes this. A man who gives a well-constructed apology for a deliberate act is a man who has thought about what the apology needs to achieve. Apology accepted, she says, because accepting it costs her nothing and refusing it tells him too much about where she is. He exhales relief or the performance of it. I value what we have here. Your work, he pauses, our friendship. Jin Hyun's friendship. I don't want anything to damage that. Then nothing will, she says. He nods. Smiles the easy, familiar smile. Thank you, Stephanie. She gathers her things. Stands Kim, she says, at the door. Yes, you're a smart man, she says. I've always thought so. He looks at her, a flicker of something in his expression, uncertain of the direction this is going. Smart enough to know, she says, that some lines only need to be drawn once. She leaves before he can answer. In the elevator, she replays his face when she said it. He didn't look chastened. He looked interested, which tells her everything she needs to know about how long this apology will last. She calls her friend Claire that night. Claire is back in Seoul, a friend from university, one of the few who attended the wedding, one of the even fewer who still calls regularly. She is direct in the way of someone who loves you enough to tell you things you don't want to hear. Stephanie tells her everything. Claire listens without interrupting, which, for Claire, is an act of will. When Stephanie finishes, the line is quiet for 4 seconds. Tell Jin Hyun, Claire says. Not yet, Stephanie, not yet, she says again. If I tell him now before I have something concrete, Kim denies it and Jin Hyun has nowhere to put his anger except at a wall. I need more. More of what? More of Kim putting his hands on you. He touched my back for 2 seconds, Claire. In this conversation, you've described 2 months of escalating behavior from a man who placed you in a foreign country, away from your husband, with significant financial dependency on him. The back touch is not the thing. The architecture is the thing. Stephanie is quiet. You're right, she says finally. I know you're right. Tell Jin Hyun. I will, she says. When I have something he can actually do something with. Claire makes a sound, not agreement, but the sound of a woman who disagrees and is deciding to let it be disagreed with for now. Be careful, Claire says. Men like Kim, the smart ones, the ones who have always gotten what they wanted because they had the resources to get it, they don't give up. They recalibrate. I know, and they're patient, Stephanie. That's what makes them dangerous. She thinks about his expression in the elevator corridor. The recalibration rather than the remorse. I know, she says again. She does know. She's just not sure it's enough to know. This is where this episode ends. The next episode is coming soon. If you enjoyed this one and love where the story is headed, please like, subscribe, and comment your favorite part. See you on the next one.